this land, I would like to pay my deepest respects to the traditional custodians, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Acknowledgement is critical, and I encourage you to continue to extend platform opportunities to First Nations organizations and leaders. Đại Gao, my name is Gloria Yoon. I'm a member of the Women on Board's Cultural Diversity Committee. I'm passionate in creating opportunities and breaking down systemic barriers for women, especially First Nations women and culturally and racially diverse women, to thrive in Australia. The Spotlight on Cultural Diversity is a series featuring amazing women supporting cultural diversity on boards. And I would like to introduce Dr. Morley Muse, a superwoman and a dear friend. Dr. Morley is a chemical, environmental, and renewable energy engineer. She is an incredible woman with multiple passions and wearing multiple hats. A board director with Women in STEM Australia, an ambassador of CSIRO's Innovation Catalyst Global, an advisory group member of the Elevate program with Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering, an expert panel member for the RISE program of Diversity Council Australia, Settlement Services International, and Chief Executive Woman. Morley is also part of the executive committee with Science Technology Australia and a member of Energy Reference Group with Gemini Energy, providing expert advice on energy transition, tariffs, and electricity price research. That's not all. She's also a co-founder of ISTEM and DIA. Morley continues to encourage and inspire women for further their careers in STEM. Dr. Morley Muse, a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for having me. It's a honor to be here and to be interviewed by you. So thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So Morley, tell us about your story. Who is Morley?
Interesting question. Morley is a very passionate woman. I was born in Nigeria. An interesting fact about me, I've lived in 5 continents of the 7 that we have. I moved to Australia about 11 years ago from the UK. I'm very passionate about solving problems. I'm a curious and an inquisitive person. I grew up very curious, very inquisitive, asking lots of questions. But more than asking questions, I like to see the questions that I ask solved. I'm someone, if there is a problem, I try to fix it. If I can't fix it, I don't speak about it. So naturally, I knew I was going to become an engineer. But I'm very passionate about the environment and sustainability. I love to see a world that is equitable, where we can all succeed, but leave enough room for everyone around us to succeed and our future generations as well. And so it wasn't a surprise when I watched a video by Al Gore on climate change. It's a 2004 video. I decided I wanted to be a part of this solution. So that created a pathway for me to study renewable energy 20 years ago, when the conversation around climate change was still in its very infant stage. When I watched that video, and I also attended a conference as a 14-year-old prior to that video, a couple of years before that video, I went to an oil company and they talked about crude oil spillage, gas flaring. Interestingly, crude oil spillage, oil companies are the ones responsible for that. But what stood out for me from this company was how they owned the problem and took on leadership with that problem. They put us in groups and told us to come up with solutions. That day, I knew I was going to do alternative energy because I started asking a question: is crude oil the only way for us to generate energy? Years later, when I watched that video, I knew I was going to solve that problem. So yes, Morley is a renewable energy engineer. But Morley is also passionate about women. I'm really passionate about women. Everyone. I mean, if I think the balance has been towards men or any underrepresented group, I would still do what I'm doing. I like to see equity, not so much of equality, but equity. So I'm passionate about seeing women in science, technology, engineering, and maths succeed. So all of what I do, including my many engagements with different organizations and my own organized companies that I've founded, ISTEM Co, and there focuses on enabling employment, leadership, and the success of women in STEM. So that's who Morley is.
Thank you. It's a huge pleasure to get to know you at a personal level, among all your passionate projects. And thanks for touching on the topic of accountability. And I see you as a really role model in Australia, taking ownership and accountability to pursue change, to your point, solving the problem that is out there to solve. So tell us more about your expertise and passionate projects, I should say.
So I think I'll start from my research project. So I completed a master's in sustainable power engineering 12 years ago from the UK, just before moving to Australia. And I looked at different renewable energy forms. Somehow I got really curious about biofuels. How do you generate energy from plant-based fuels? While asking that question, what came to my mind was microalgae. They are mostly considered as waste. You find them on wastewater systems. But how do there's a lot of conversation around circular economy, converting waste energy, ensuring that nothing goes to waste. Yesterday, I was at a Vogue, the Melbourne Fashion Week, and there was a lot of conversations around reducing waste. So that was what I focused on during my master's, and I decided I was going to continue that. So I looked at a project where you extract microalgae from wastewater systems and convert that to energy that can be used for electricity. Since graduating from my PhD, I've also spent time focusing on hydrogen, renewable hydrogen generation. But I'm also glad to say I have been given a unique opportunity with Gemini Energy on their energy, as a member of their energy reference group, which is an independent group brought together by Gemini, but we are completely independent voice to advise on the energy transition. So my role as a renewable energy expert is to provide advice on the energy transition. How do we move from the current coal, gas to a sustainable energy future? That's one of my passionate projects, if you like to call it that way. Since graduating, I'm hoping at some point to convert my research into a startup, but you have to do one thing at a time. So for me right now, the biggest challenge that I see within Australia and also in the world is gender equity in STEM. Because when we talk about renewable energy, we talk about climate change, the energy transition, we need people to fill those roles. 20 years ago, we didn't think that there would be occupations like software engineers, DevOps, companies that refuse to embrace the digital age, like Nokia or Kodak, they ran out of business, or they lost that place that they had to other companies like Apple, Samsung. So we have to be innovative, but for us to be innovative, we have to be inclusive. So what I tell people is, if we are going to have that big push in energy transition. Just to give you an idea, initially we set a target to hit 100% renewables in Australia by 2050. That has been brought closer to meet 82% by 2030. Currently, we have 25% of our energy in Victoria being produced by solar panels, so renewables, right? But we have to move even faster. I think a few weeks ago, the government has announced that we have to move from gas to completely electricity. And there is a lot of push for electric vehicles, for us to get more electric vehicles and to become more sustainable. Now, the question is, there'll be jobs in these areas. Who is going to fill those roles? For the last 3 days, we've had the All Energy Conference at the Melbourne Exhibition Centre with full-on conversation around energy transition, future jobs. I'll tell you the answer, Gloria. Women. We are the future. No jokes. According to Tech Council of Australia, by 2030, we would need additional 1.2 million tech workers. Who is going to fill those roles? By 2025, 90% of the jobs in Australia would need STEM skills. Unfortunately, when you say STEM, as in science, technology, engineering, and maths, people think it's niche, but it's not niche at all. If you use a computer, you're involved already in STEM. But this is the problem, and this is the challenge. We currently have only 27% of women working in STEM across Australia, with only 15% of women with STEM qualifications actually working in STEM. You would wonder, where are the other percentage? The biggest challenge we have to diversity and inclusion is not so much of diversity and inclusion, but retention. We have 36% of graduates in STEM across Australia identify as women, but that's not translating into employment and leadership. For a long time, we've all tried to solve this problem. But I think one of the areas where we've been unsuccessful is we've tried to solve it solely from a gender lens. Unfortunately, we can't do that alone. We have to consider gender intersection. Why? From the STEM workforce report by Australia's chief scientist released in 2020, the statistics show that 56% of university qualified women in STEM in Australia are Australian women born overseas, migrant women. These are not temporary migrants. These are not students. These are women who have made that very difficult journey to call Australia home for whatever reason. Unfortunately, they experience over 4 times higher unemployment rates. Women as a whole experience problems retaining their employment in STEM, so they switch into other areas. If this keeps happening, we are losing money. We are losing talent. Recent statistics shows that the lack of gender equity in Australia is costing us $128 billion annually. We are losing money. When I looked at this problem, I decided I'll be part of the solution. My first experience with gender bias was during my PhD. When I started my PhD, Gloria, I had just had my first son. He was 3 weeks old. It was challenging. I've got 3 boys now. Fast forward post-PhD, I was pregnant with my 3rd son and I worked in construction. During my PhD, I noticed there was a lot of disengagement for women in STEM. Female students coming in first year, dropping out by second year. I wanted to do something about the problem. So I started a club for women in science and engineering. But that passion drove me beyond the walls of the university, which then brings me to my first board leadership experience, Women in STEM Australia. I reached out. It took quite some time to have coffee with the leaders. I shared some of my passion, some of my ideas, did some board observership, which we'll talk about, I think, later in the conversation. But that was my first leadership role across Australia. And since then, I've been involved in multiple STEM leadership roles. I try to stay within STEM, but when opportunities come, for example, with the RISE expert panel, with Diversity Council, in collaboration with Chief Executive Women and Settlement Services International, which, Gloria, you also sit on that panel. I try my best to extend my tentacles as much as I can take to contribute those values. So these are some of the projects that I'm working on. On the personal side, I realized, like I said, the main issues are employment and retention. To tackle this, I wasn't seeing anyone doing that. Companies were complaining that they can't find women in their organizations. The women were saying we're applying, but they weren't being given a chance. So I started a company called ISTEM. ISTEM, actually, no one has asked me this, but the I stands for Illuminate STEM. So Illuminate showcase women. So with ISTEM, we do consulting, research, and talent sourcing. We work with STEM companies across Australia, companies like Telstra, Westpac, Arup. We've worked with some very big companies to help them recruit and retain talent through different programs. But we noticed that there was still a big challenge. When we started talking to more women, especially women from underserved communities, we started hearing things like they had to change their names to Anglo names to gain opportunities. For women who had taken a career break, wanting to come back to industry, they had to hide their age. We saw that women with extensive overseas qualifications had to somehow hide their country of birth. We all know that these things are wrong, but we can keep saying they are wrong. If we don't do anything, nothing changes. It's going to take, as it is, 100 years to achieve gender parity. So as an engineer, myself and my co-founder, Dr. Rwangi Fernando, she's an AI and data scientist. We decided to use technology to solve this problem. So what did we do? We created a platform called DARE. DARE stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Retention. It's a platform where we've completely used technology and AI to eliminate recruitment bias. How do we do that? As a woman in STEM, when you create your profile, we've got tools that would completely de-identify you, remove, it's an anonymous recruitment tool. So your name, your age, all of those elements that could make anyone to discriminate you, it's completely eliminated. What an employer sees when they look at the people who apply for those jobs are your skills, your expertise, your qualification, what they need to see to make an informed decision. So I invite everyone who wants to solve this problem. Let's work together, especially, I think, for women on board. You are in a privileged position to actually make a difference. So let's work together and get more women employed beyond cupcakes on International Women's Day.
Well, absolutely. I love how you say women is going to change the world. We need more women and illuminate more women in STEM, but also we need more women on boards. And I love how you take STEM to Vogue and also to the runway and make it more relatable to everyone. Because to your point, everybody can work in STEM. And
Yes.
thanks for turning it into solutions, actually multiple solutions. And talking about the importance of accountability, governance, and having representation, especially at the board level, could you share a bit about how did you get to, for example, the Gemini Energy Reference Group or other board positions? Because we know we talked about, entrance access, but what about access to boardrooms?
Great question. As you know, Gloria, the underrepresentation of women in STEM as it is at junior levels, it's even worse as at senior levels. Currently, we only have 8% of women that are CEOs in STEM, and only 23% of women in senior leadership positions. So yes, I agree the numbers are low. But for me, what has worked, normally I'm not the kind of person that anyone would want to get into their board, right? Especially in Australia.
Why not?
Well, I'm a Black woman. I'm not the typical stereotypical person that would get into boards. Let's say it as it is. But I'll tell you what makes a difference for me. I know the value that I bring. That's the first thing. Most times when I talk to women, especially women in senior leadership that need to get to the next level of being an executive, you would be surprised how much women still struggle with confidence. They don't think they are the person for that role. The truth is, if no one has told you, I'm going to say that to you if you're watching, you deserve a seat at the table. That's the first thing. Change starts from our mind. It starts from within. No one sees inside our insecurities, our fears, our failures. But what people can see is the emotions we project from within to the outside. The other thing that I would say is be passionate about solving a problem, not just looking for opportunities. Opportunities would come from your impact. But if you're not solving any problem, and solving a problem doesn't need to be like on global stage immediately, but it's to start from where you're at. What problems can you see around you within your organization from your work history? What can you see that you want to solve? That's the first question. So if you're an aspiring woman wanting to get into board, I would suggest to take some time. It's called a reflective journey. Maybe go away somewhere. It's good if you go to somewhere that's got nature. At least for me, that works. Get a journal and then try to ask yourself like some very honest questions. What are some mistakes? What's been your journey so far? Where are you at? Where do you want to be? Now, once you have clarity on those questions, try to ask, what are some organizations that align with my values? Then just reach out. LinkedIn is a perfect tool. If you're not using it, and this is not me campaigning for LinkedIn, I didn't get anything to do that, but it's really helped me in my journey. Most times we feel like we need to be introduced to speak to someone else. I do agree, traditionally, that's how it's been. But look, if you don't have anyone to introduce you and you are sure of the value that you can bring on board, reach out. Ask for coffee catch-ups. And then when you ask for coffee catch-up, don't just start saying what you want, or don't just start saying, I would like you to do this and that. I want to get on your board, this and that. Try to genuinely build a relationship. Through that, your inner strength or your the impact of the work that you're doing would speak for itself, right? And opportunities would come. So for me, I reach out, I network a lot. So networking for sure. The other bit is visibility. sometimes women say, oh, but I'm doing this, but no one is seeing, because you're not putting yourself out there. And I know, true, for you to put yourself out there, there is a bit of risks you have to take to be vulnerable. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of strength in vulnerability. So we need to embrace it. Be visible. Take on opportunities like this. Invitations to do podcasts, invitations to speak at events if you can. In that way, your expertise would come through. People will get to know you. At this stage, there is a lot of push in Australia to achieve, and in the world, to achieve gender parity. So when you speak or when you put yourself out there, know that you are needed. So that's why you have to, first of all, do that reflective journey. So believe in the value that you bring on board. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. And yeah, network, and then put yourself out there. Be visible. Be visible and opportunities will come to you. But also be prepared. Opportunity meets preparation. With preparation, I mean, if you're aspiring to get into a board, what kind of courses have you taken? Have you taken leadership courses like the AICD leadership course? Be prepared. Because if the opportunity comes and you're not prepared, you miss out.
I love how you share. And firstly, thank you for sharing your reflective journey and the steps that you have taken with us in such an honest and vulnerable way. Women on Boards also offer a number of courses to get aspiring board leaders prepared, and also provide that visibility and also networking opportunities, which are the few critical elements that you've touched on. And thanks for highlighting value, passion, and impact. And I'm sure that aspiring board members would really enjoy learning from you and also taking on that reflective journey. And on the other side, what advice or tips would you be able to give to existing current board directors or board chairs in increasing representation? Because earlier you touched on innovation starts with inclusion.
Yes. When people say things like, so I get sometimes when I speak to CEOs and business leaders, they say, we are struggling to find women or diverse people within our organization. The first question I ask is, where are you looking? And most times they'll say, well, some of our jobs come through referrals, networking, which is good. The problem, though, is if your network looks like you, is completely homogeneous, then obviously what you get is what you have, right? So the first thing I would love to encourage leaders to do is to expand their network. Get people that don't look like you, different gender, different skin color, different expert knowledge. That's what diversity really is, right? And look broadly. Look broadly. A lot of times when I advocate for women to get at the table, it almost seems like, okay, we are doing this as charity, or we are doing this to tick boxes. But there is no such thing. Because the first thing is, whether it's a woman, whether it's someone with any intersectionality, they have to, first of all, tick the box of being an expert in that field. I'm an engineer. I know my stuff. I've done my research. But then I happen to be a woman and I happen to be a person of color. It doesn't mean that because I'm a woman and a person of color, and then I'm put at the table just because of that. So it's an added advantage to the organization to have all of that intersection. But the first step is you're there because you're an engineer. So that's the first thing. Expand your network, expand where you're looking. A company that I worked with, they struggled with getting diversity within their organization. And we had that conversation and we found that they mostly hired based on referral. So where we did some policy review, I helped them to review restructure. Now, easily, they have more than a quarter of their people, women. They have more women of color. They have more people of color. They're a lot more open-minded to see. But previously, they were struggling, but they made some changes. So that brings me to the next bit. As a leader, for you to see a change, you also have to make some changes. There's a saying that you can't do the same thing and see the same result and see a different result. So you have to be willing to make some changes. Then on the other side, for women who are on board, I would encourage you to speak up. First of all, you are there because you deserve to be there. You're there to make a difference. Don't be a passive board member. Speak up. You know, your ideas, your contributions are valued. Because sometimes women and people from underserved background, when given that opportunity to be at the table, there is this perception that you should be so grateful and just be quiet. But no, of course, you don't have to tear the room down and be completely confrontational, but you should have your views heard. If you do not agree with something, you should politely be able to express that. You should do because remember that when you're there, it's not just Gloria that you're representing, but you're representing Gloria, who is a woman, Gloria, who is a woman of color, Gloria, who is speaking for women coming in through the door, women at mid-level, women at senior level. So if you are quiet when you're in those rooms, you're a dissatisfaction to the women or to the people that you're representing. So that's, I guess, some tips.
Well, amazing. Expanding network, look broadly, and also embrace differences, and also for board members to own the voice and really use the voice, especially when you sometimes feel like there are certain expectations imposed on you. I'm sure that we can all kind of resonate depending on the situation. So, wow, I think we can actually carry on this conversation forever. It's been an absolute pleasure, Morley. Thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you all the very best in your many, many endeavors.
Thank you again for having me.